Hi everyone, I'm Rejoice on Umatta Consultant Podcast. If today's your first time on our show, please make sure you subscribe to all of our social media channels, especially Spotify. Today we have the special privilege of speaking with Julio. Julio is the CEO of BioAccess, the fast tracking first in human trials anywhere, and for an insightful conversation on medical innovation and global clinical trials. I'd love for him to also introduce himself as he sees fit, and we'll dive right into the questions. So, Julio, the mic is yours, please.
Hey, Rejoice, thank you for having me here. I look forward to our conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you. So, Julio, let's start from the beginning. What sparked your interest in clinical research and innovation? And how did your career path sort of led you to bioaccess?
Well, Rejoice, it's kind of a long story because I came from a totally different space, a totally different industry, which was the telecom and networking industry. I trained as an electrical engineer in Bogota, Colombia, and I left the country many years ago, and I settled in the Boston area. So I worked for Nortel Networks first, which was one of the leading telecom and networking companies at that time. And then I transitioned to another company called Lucent Technologies, which was also a leading telecom and networking company at that time. Global companies with operations all over the world, et cetera, et cetera. And they were competing with Alcatel, with Siemens, Ericsson, Nokia, all those big telecom and networking players. And I also completed my MBA in Boston. And I transitioned from a technical engineering role to a more sales and marketing role and business role in general. But that event or those events in my professional life helped me join the work that my brother started doing on his own. And his name is Pedro, and Pedro also left the country, Colombia, around the same time that I did, a couple of years later. But he also settled in Boston. He's a physician, a doctor. He completed medical school in Colombia, and he moved to Boston. He did a few years of research at Harvard. And then he completed his internal medicine residency in Cleveland, Ohio, at the Case Western Metro Health Medical Center, Case Western University Metro Health Medical Center, and then went back to Boston. He did cardiology and then interventional cardiology at the Beth Israel Medical Center, which is part of the Harvard Medical School program. And that training that Pedro received led him to become a professor at the University of Miami. And he met his mentor in Miami, Dr. William O'Neill, who is considered one of the top authorities in the world of interventional cardiology. And they together worked with many startup companies that were developing advanced medical technologies or devices in the structural heart space. And they did some trials in Colombia. They did several first-in-human trials in Latin America, but particularly in Colombia, they did with one physician in Cali. They did about 5 different trials, and they quickly realized that there was a need to have a company out of Miami to help these startups with their first-in-human research in Latin America. The University of Miami was facilitating these trials, but it is not set up for that. Usually the work of facilitating clinical research is done by a type of company that is called contract research organizations. And they didn't know that at that time. They were just clinicians. They were just doctors doing their clinical work. But they called me one day and said, Julio, we are having success bringing these clinical trials to Colombia, and we need some help with regulatory matters, importation matters, business in general, administrative matters. Can you help us? Can you join us? We just set up a company. Can you take the lead? And that's what I did. It was a moment in my life where I had just finished a consulting project that I did for over a year at Johns Hopkins University. Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. And it was my first experience in a hospital setting. Because remember, I came from the telecom and networking world. Then I got into a hospital setting in the cardiology division of the hospital in Baltimore. And I was also assigned to a project in Trinidad and Tobago at a hospital there. So I was, for over a year or so, I was involved in the medical world. And I started learning a lot about it. And then a few months later, Pedro and Dr. O'Neill spoke with me about the possibility of me joining the company. And it was just a one-man operation. It was just Pedro trying to do his trials. Yeah. And I took over. And since then, that happened in 2010. And since then, I've been leading BioAccess, and we've grown the company to about 40 employees, and we are in close to 7 countries in Latin America. We just started an operation in Australia and Eastern Europe, and we're very proud of what we've built, helping companies do trials overseas.
Great. It sounds like they knew you had the skills to lead them to the next destination.
It looks like, yeah.
And you took the leap of faith also to leave what you were doing to join their mission. So kudos to you for recognizing the opportunity.
Thank you. Yes.
So Julio, what role do you see assistive technology and broader digital innovation playing in the future of medtech and the clinical trials? Are startups leveraging these tools effectively yet, in your opinion?
Yes. I see more and more companies developing advanced medical devices. When I say the word advanced, I mean incorporating tools like the ones that you are describing, and especially artificial intelligence, new manufacturing methods, new materials, smaller chips. Devices now come with apps. So there are all sort of digital tools involved with devices because they are becoming smarter and smarter than before. Before devices, there's been a couple of trends. The first one is devices were limited to a hospital setting. Now devices have left the hospital. I mean, of course, they're still in hospitals, but they can also be at homes. So that's when you start seeing more and more digital tools being incorporated into devices, because you need to monitor the performance of the devices outside of the hospital setting or after the implantation. So that's one thing. The other thing is artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence is part of those digital tools being incorporated into devices. And in clinical trials, from the CRO, the Contract Research Organization perspective, we see artificial intelligence technologies being used to find patients. In other words, the success of a trial heavily depends on the ability to recruit patients. And most of the trials fail because they don't meet the recruitment goals. So whatever you can do with digital tools to increase the chances of recruitment, the better. So for example, imagine a hospital that has 50 different trials going on. So how do you recruit patients that are going through the regular consult in the hospital? How do the research department identify those patients? So if you're doing 1 or 2 trials, it's easy. You just have a human doing the work, trying to match the medical records with the trials that they have at the research department. But if you're running 50, 60, 100 trials, which is an actual number, some hospitals, some busy hospitals in the US are running 100 trials easily, concurrently. So how do you ensure that you're really telling the primary care physicians, all the specialists that have a contact with the patients every day, they are not yet part of the trial, but you need to identify as possible candidates for the trial. So you need to have some artificial intelligence tools to match the information in the electronic medical records, the EMR system, and the research department. So that's a great use of digital tools for recruitment. And also the other application that I see a lot, Joyce, is in after the fact. After you identify the patient, how do you explain the patient the study?
Exactly.
How do you communicate a complex 30-page informed consent document to a patient that hasn't finished high school?
Yeah.
So how do you put it in very simple terms
Right.
that he or she can understand? So you use artificial intelligence tools, specifically large language models specifically trained for clinical research, to simplify the language and create infographics, or simple landing pages where patients can self-screen themselves, things like that, that also help with recruitment.
You're saying a lot, because my own personal visit to hospitals, I've observed where nurses or maybe physicians are using methods such as $50 to $100 incentives to be part of this trial.
Yes.
And I think people are just not interested in those things anymore. Where you have to constantly ask them as they're in the waiting area waiting for their visit. They just want to go into their visit and leave. So I like that, the technology being able to do matchmaking on its own in a productive way without
Yes,
with the
exactly.
in the hospital.
Yeah.
Great points. Great points. So Julio, where does medical innovation really begin? This is the heart of our conversation.
Yes, it is the heart of the conversation. And I'm sure listeners have been waiting for this moment.
In the lab, the market need, or is it entirely somewhere else that you need to share with us today?
Well, the story usually begins at a university. So universities are funded by the federal government. So the NIH is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, funder of biomedical research in the world. And that keeps the United States very, very competitive in the medical innovation industry ecosystem. And the NIH distributes these funds to these universities, and then their labs develop new molecules or new devices, and then they usually have all these PhD students working on those innovations or those developments that eventually make it to a patent, to an intellectual property in the form of a patent. And that patent is usually held at an office inside the university that is traditionally known as the transfer office. The transfer office. Transfer meaning that the university is not in the business of running companies, right? They are in the business of developing the innovations to a point where they can get a patent issued under their name. And there's a lot of money to be made. Actually, I think universities make way more money with patents than with actual students. So they need the students, they need talented students that eventually will become researchers so that they can continue issuing patents. So that's really the engine of innovation. So then the transfer office identifies entrepreneurs inside or outside the university who can take on those patents, meaning they can license those patents and develop the medical technology, medical product, medical innovation, call it a molecule, call it a device, whatever it is. So these entrepreneurs, sometimes they are just PhD students who worked in the patent, who work in the development of that innovation that translated into a patent, that eventually become the CEOs of those new companies. they are usually called spin-off companies. So the point is that somebody needs to look at the patent and say, this patent has great potential. I think millions and millions of patients around the world can benefit from this innovation. The impact is called, usually in the industry, people talk about the global impact of the patent, of the innovation. So if the impact is huge and is an unmet need that hasn't been addressed in 30, 40 years or so, then it's really something that is worth pursuing as an innovator, as the CEO of a company to get funding and build a team around the patent and then do all the preclinical testing and all the clinical testing needed to move the patent forward or move the product forward so that eventually it can be at a hospital ready to be implanted on a patient, in the case of a medical device or a drug, ready to be taken by a patient. But these companies then start at the university, spin-offs. Then they, as I said, they raise some funds, a few $1 million. They build a team around the company. They usually incorporate the company in Delaware, and they start developing the technology, meaning if it is a medical device, they develop the prototype in the lab, they do all the testing that they need to do, and then they do some animal studies, and then they move into the clinical phase, which is the human clinical trial, clinical research studies. And it is really, really important, just to emphasize that the objective of these companies is to get acquired. Most of these companies have what in the industry we call an exit in mind. And that exit is usually to get acquired. It's what in the financial world they call a liquidity event. A liquidity event, meaning that the money that the investors invested in the company years ago is going to become liquid in that transaction that is going to happen 5 years out or 7 years out. Usually larger companies like Medtronic, Boston Scientific, Johnson & Johnson, the big players in the medical device space, and also in the pharmaceutical space, Merck, Pfizer, Novartis, they are actively looking for startup companies to acquire, to buy. Every day, they go shopping. It's like MENA, like Facebook, like Apple. They go shopping every single week. I mean, they acquire a company every single week because they need these companies to fuel their innovation engine. They need to remain competitive. And there's another term that is really, really important to define here, which is called de-risking the acquisition. De-risking. So you remove the risk of acquiring these companies by developing the product in such a way and to a point where it is seen as the acquirer, the buyer of the startup, as a product that will make it to the market really quickly. Because you as an entrepreneur who identify the patent at a university have de-risked the investment, their investment. Because one thing is to imagine if you were Medtronic. Imagine you going to a university and trying to license the patent out from that university. It's a very risky proposition because they don't know if the device is going to work or the molecule is going to work. So this entrepreneur that stepped in before Medtronic comes in and buys the patent, they stepped in and they took all the risk. They got the money, they funded the trials, they did whatever it took to bring the innovation to a point where it is now at the risk investment for the potential buyer. And so that's the cycle of innovation. That's how the big players have always something new coming up in their portfolio because somebody else took the risk and did all the work behind the scenes needed to bring the innovation to a point where it's ready to get to be taken to the next level, meaning that the buyer of the startup company They invest all the money that is needed to take that innovation from that first in human trial, because that first in human trial is really the pivotal moment, is the value inflection point or milestone that will make it or break it.
Yes.
I mean, it will determine if the device works or not, or the molecule works in humans or not. And if you can show us, the startup company, that the device actually works in humans or the molecule works in humans, then it will open the door for all these buyers to acquire your company eventually.
Thank you so much for that thorough response. Julio, I would like to ask you a follow-up clarifying question, if you will allow me. You mentioned that medical innovation starts in the university level, and the university typically looks for students or PhD folks to work on these types of innovation and create a pattern. So my next curiosity stems from who then gets credit for the innovation? Is it the student or the university? If you can clarify that.
Yes, yeah. Well, usually the patent have different inventors, right? So there is the actual inventor of the patent. Of course, there's just an internal discussion or negotiation that happens inside the university. Who is going to be named as the inventor?
Right.
And you can have 2 inventors or 3 inventors, 5 inventors, right? So you have the inventor and you also have the assignee. So the inventors assign the patent to a third party that is kind of in charge of managing the patent. It's going to be the person or the entity that is going to be able to license the patent out to a third party. So you can have the university also as the inventor, but usually the university and the inventor come to some sort of agreement where if I am the inventor of the patent, I can profit from the patent, but I have to give the university a percentage of whatever money the patent produces later. So there are already percentage splits and stuff established in the industry for that.
Gotcha. Awesome. And then my second question, as a clarifying to what you're saying, when these companies are going around shopping for the innovation or the idea or the pattern, I guess do they have a specific school they're going towards, or how did they get their information where the ideas are coming from?
Great question. Well, usually these large companies have what is called a corporate development department or division. It's usually corporate development. That's kind of the keywords that you're gonna see in their LinkedIn profiles or in their company homepages. Yeah, corporate development, meaning that they are always doing networking, going to events, going to the different industry conferences.
Okay.
Just looking for companies. In every industry conference, there is usually an event inside the conference called a pitch session, right? Meaning that, let's say you go to TCT, I think it's called TCT, which is the most important interventional cardiology conference in the world. And it's an annual conference, of course. And during the conference, during the 3 days of the conference, or 4 days or whatever it is, there are different pitch sessions, meaning that the organizers of the conference invite startup companies at a discounted rate. They sometimes it's even free. They come in and they have 3 minutes to pitch their company to investors that are sitting in the audience. Right? So that's how these buyers and investors are always in the know. They always are aware of what new companies and new products are coming into the pipelines. Yeah, so that's usually how it happens, and also word of mouth and relationships. If I started a company 5 years ago from a university and I sold my company to Medtronic, and today I start another company that I think will be a good fit for Medtronic too, I will call my friends at Medtronic who worked with me in the first company. So you kind of get into the club.
Yes, yes,
And yeah, and everybody knows each other.
yes.
And somehow they have what is called deal flow. That's the name in the industry, deal flow. Deal flow meaning that every day that you open your email on Monday, you should have one or two different companies to look at during the week. So that's your deal flow. Otherwise, you're not doing your job.
I like that. I like that. Your circle of influence becomes
Yes,
also
your circle
part
of
of
influence. Yeah.
your business strategy. Let me ask you the next question. What early strategic decisions make or break a med tech innovations path for approval?
Well, I think the most important decision is, or several important decisions. The first one I will say it is money. Really putting together a plan on how to use the funds that you're going to get from your investors. Meaning that, remember, these are startup companies with 3 to 5 people, no more than that. And they are not receiving any income at all except for investors' money. They're not generating revenue. They're not having sales. So they have what in the industry people refer to as a burn rate. A burn rate. Every day they're burning cash. So if I get $1 million today, I have to pay salaries, I have to pay rent, I have to pay for my website, for all these services and products, etc., that I need to keep my company afloat. So every day I'm burning cash. And in the industry, people also refer to another terminology, another word is called the runway. So they usually ask you, what's your runway? Meaning, how many days do I have until I run out of money, right? How many months or years, whatever it is. So you as the CEO of the company with your team, you have to really put together a well-structured plan to invest or burn your cash so that you can hit the right milestones with the right funds. I think that's the most important thing. And also the design of your first in-human trial. You need to design the trials in such a way that they're going to produce the results, or you're going to measure the biomarkers and you're going to have the endpoints. That's the word that people use in the industry. In the design of the protocol, you have the right endpoints. And also you have to design the trial in such a way that the FDA will accept the data.
That is true.
You should have negotiated with the FDA the details of the design of the study. So as soon as you incorporate your company, usually in Delaware, you speak with the FDA and you speak with your potential buyers. In other words, as soon as I incorporate the company, I call Medtronic, I call Boston Scientific, I'll call all those guys that I already know because they're in my circle or whatever, and then I kind of strategize my company based on their interest, based on what they want to see, and also on what the FDA wants to see. So you kind of work backwards, right? Yeah, you reverse engineer what they tell you that you want to see, so to speak.
Makes sense. It's a good process to have along the way.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
As we go back to the founders and their mindset, how should founders balance scientific rigor with market urgency from your point?
Yeah, it's a tough balance. It's a tough balance because you want to get your trial done as quickly as possible because you want to, remember, time is really the name of the game here.
Yes.
You want your investors and you, as the founder of the company, you want to hit the milestones as quickly as possible so that your investors make money faster and you make money too, of course, because everybody has shares in the company and every day that passes, you're looking at that exit. You're looking at that closing where Medtronic is going to pay you $300 million for your company, something like that. So you want to move as quickly as possible, but at the same time, you have to be very careful on how you move, because every step needs to be well calculated, because you're going in one direction. You don't want to deviate in the wrong direction. You want to go straight. But sometimes there are things that deviate your plans. You get on the wrong, you get on the highway and you get off the wrong exit. I mean, that happens in life. And that's a scientific rigor that we're discussing here. I mean, you want to plan your trial in such a way that you are doing everything that is right on the regulatory aspects, on the ethical aspects, in the recruitment of the patients. You are selecting the right investigators, and you have to do your due diligence on these investigators. You're not just going to do a trial in any hospital that says that is interested in doing the trial. You have to go through at least 10, 20 different potential investigators and interview them and go to their facilities and visit them and make sure they are going to deliver on their promises. Make sure they're going to follow the protocol. Make sure they have the right patient volume so that they can recruit patients for your study. But that takes time. So you want to move fast, but at the same time, you have to do all these steps very well calculated. So yeah.
Makes sense. I actually like the due diligence piece because, if your investors have invested in your product, you are looking for a long-term return, and you don't want to mess up the process with just
exactly
anyone on board. Definitely risky.
Yes. Of course, you cannot predict the future. Sometimes things happen, but you're trying to kind of plan the future.
As much as possible.
As much as possible, yes.
Yes. I always wonder, and this may be a clarifying question, do you feel like someone who may have bought a pattern will have the same skill set as someone managing the process that you just talked about? Or does it require a complete different person to manage the due diligence piece?
Well, usually the due diligence piece is done by the contract research organization, by the CRO. That's why you hire the CRO. Usually a mistake that I see companies make, Joyce, is that they want to manage the clinical research process. I mean, the clinical research industry is a huge industry. It has very specialized personnel. Mm-hmm. It's like data centers. The other day I was on a podcast, somebody and the host asked me a question. Do you see startup companies having their own servers in-house, or they outsource that job to a third party? And the answer was, some of them start managing their own servers, but they quickly realize that that's not their core business.
Yes.
They're not experts at managing servers and the infrastructure and the temperature of the room, having all these computers, all these racks, and it's not scalable. So you subcontract that with Amazon AWS, with Google, right? With these companies that specialize in that. So same thing with clinical research. If you're a startup company, 3 to 5 people, you try to hire experts for each one of the different activities that you need to do, and you try to hire the best experts. And I know that you want to save money. Oh, that good expertise costs money. Right?
It does.
If you want to hire a top attorney from New York, I mean, it's going to cost you $2,000 an hour, not $20 an hour.
Yes. Yeah.
So you can hire your cousin for $20 an hour, but you're not going to get the same results as a $2,000 an hour attorney.
Fantastic.
So that's what happens.
Yeah, fantastic answer. And I completely agree with you. Put your money where you value. And
yes.
Especially in business, you don't want to spread your talents and your people so thin, and you're not getting the results that you need.
Exactly. Yeah, we've been in situations where we've had to rescue clinical trials, where they choose the wrong investigator in the wrong country at the wrong hospital, and it becomes a mess because they wanted to save money. They didn't want to hire a CRO, so things like that. So.
Exactly. Julio, how does fast tracking clinical trials directly affect a company's ability to raise capital?
Yes. remember that these companies, as I said before, Rejoice, are on a race. Every day counts. So time is the name of the game. So they go through different founding rounds. They initially start with friends and family funds, and or in parallel or after that, they get NIH funds. There are federal government funding for innovation, medical innovation. And if you're lucky enough, you can get one of these grants. And the beauty of these grants is that the terminology is that it's non-dilutive money. In other words, you don't dilute your ownership stake in the company because it's free money that the government is giving you without an exchange for shares in the company.
Right.
Whereas as an investor, if an investor comes in, even if it is your grandmother, she will have shares in the company, unless it's a gift, right? But or a loan, which happens too. But most investors will want a percentage of the shares of the company. So with that said, these companies go through different rounds. You ask for money based on the milestones that you need to hit. You don't ask for $30 million up front when you just have an idea on a napkin, right?
Right.
You ask for $100,000, right?
Yeah.
Because you need to take the idea from the napkin and get some attorneys and get the patent and things like that. So you go little by little. So you go through different founding rounds. So following up on what I said earlier in the conversation with Joyce, the first in human trial is a value inflection point that really decides the future of the company. Because you have invested all this money and time and effort developing the technology in the lab, in animals, or testing the technology in animals, and then you are ready to a first in human trial. And if you are able to show potential investors that you are getting good results on the first human trial, and of course, you're looking to do that first human trial as soon as possible, as soon as you finish your animal studies. I mean, right after you finish your last animal and you get the results, you immediately submit to an ethics committee or an IRB, Institutional Review Board, for approval of the trial. That's the ideal scenario, so you don't waste a single day. Because once you get the first in human trial done, you're going to be able to raise more money. Because now investors have noticed that you have the risk, their investment, right? So now you're asking for another $1 million, but you already took the risk. You already did the hard work that nobody wants to do. So now they're getting kind of a free ride or a less risky ride.
Right.
Because you already validated the technology. So yes, fast tracking the first in human trial is really the goal of all medical device companies. They all need data, clinical data, as soon as possible so that they can move to the next step, which is raising more money, speaking with the FDA about a larger clinical trial that is usually called a pivotal study. And also you speak with your strategics, meaning the potential buyers, acquirers, Medtronic, Boston Scientific. You pick up the phone and call your friends at Medtronic at the corporate development department. You tell him, hey, I just finished my first in human trial in Panama or in Colombia or in Costa Rica. We did great. Patients are doing fantastic. We are following up on the patients every day. It's been 6 months that they got the device implanted. So we're ready to talk about a potential partnership down the road. We're about to talk to the FDA, etc. So that's when the conversation gets very, very interesting with those potential buyers.
Very true. Very true. And I want you to also further elaborate what makes med tech startup attractive to Series A or B investors in today's climate.
Yes. Well, I think there are many answers to that question, or different points, different items in the checklist to answer that question. For example, you need to have a very solid team, meaning you don't hire your attorney cousin for $20 an hour. I mean, if he's a divorce attorney, he cannot do your patent.
Yeah.
So if an investor sees that you're hiring your cousin who is a divorce attorney, I mean, they'll be like, how am I gonna make sure that if I give you $100,000 or $1 million to develop a device, you're gonna get the right help? I mean, you're hiring your attorney for a patent. He's clueless about it. Hire the right people. Hire Wilson Sonsini, for example, which is one of the top medtech law firms in the world in San Francisco. So you hired great attorneys because that will give you credibility. You're showing your investors that you know what you're doing. You're hiring the right people, the right expertise, world-class expertise. That's the first thing. And that applies also to your medical advisor. So there's a famous saying that says something like, you are the sum of the 5 closest people you hang out with, something like that.
Yes.
Same thing applies to medical device startups. I mean, you have the top attorney in the industry, you have the top clinical advisor, meaning you talk, if your device is in cardiology, you call Johns Hopkins, you call Mayo Clinic, and you get the top interventional cardiologists in the world to be on your site, to be on your website, to be your medical advisor. So now in your investor calls, you can tell your investor, listen, look at my pitch deck, look at my website. Dr. Smith from Mayo Clinic is my clinical advisor. So I'm in good company.
Yes.
Right. So that adds to the credibility. And the other thing that I suggest is, of course, a great website and a great clinical strategy. Investors need to know where you're going with your company. I've seen hundreds of pitch decks, meaning that my clients usually send me their pitch decks for us to understand what they're doing with the technology and for us to help them with the study, with the clinical trial. And I see how they develop the pitch deck. They have the plan well laid out. They know exactly when they're going to hit the milestones, and they even show investors how Medtronic, how Boston Scientific have acquired similar companies in that space and at what price point. So investors can see the end of the tunnel. If I am an investor, I'm giving you $1 million, but I want to know, show me when I'm going to get my money back and how much money more I'm going to get back. That's called the multiple. How many multiples I'm going to get back. So those are some of the things that I see my startup clients do to get more traction with investors.
Great points. Great points. In your earlier answer, you mentioned clinical trials being in different countries and etc. What are some of the untapped advantages of running trials in Latin America, the Balkans, or Australia?
Well, in Latin America, there are a few countries that are the top candidates for first-in-human trials, medical device first-in-human trials. There's no perfect country. Every country has pros and cons, right? Every study is also different. Every study needs to be matched with the right country, with the right investigator, with the right hospital. So there are many variables that you need to work on to solve the equation, right? To solve the formula.
Yes.
So what you do is, if you are looking to do a small trial on a disease that is highly prevalent, then you can go to a smaller country like Panama, Paraguay, Dominican Republic, El Salvador. But if you're looking to recruit patients on a more complex clinical trial, where the prevalence of the disease is not as high, or the inclusion criteria, the patient inclusion and exclusion criteria is so narrow that you're going to have difficulty recruiting patients because you're looking for that perfect subset of patients, then you have to move to a larger country like Mexico or Brazil, right? Argentina, Colombia. Larger populations also mean that more red tape
Yes.
and more regulatory requirements and things like that. So you have to balance that out. I mean, am I willing to wait 6 months for approval, or do I want approval tomorrow and not being able to recruit? So you have to balance those variables.
Great point. Great point. And I'm glad you mentioned regulatory because I'm also curious, how do you navigate ethical, cultural, and regulatory nuances across different global regions when you're supporting these founders?
Well, we've been doing this for almost 20 years now, Rejoice, and we kind of know how to strategize these clinical trials, and we know who to call, in other words, and when to call, and what to say when we call.
Exactly.
Yes. So we have developed a good knowledge set of all these different regulatory requirements. They don't move as fast as people think. I mean, they're pretty static, so countries don't change their requirements that often. So
Right.
you kind of are always on top of things, and you have local resources. By the way, we're based out of Miami, but we have resources in all these different countries, and those are local experts. I mean, people that have the pulse of what's going on daily in Mexico, daily in Brazil, so they can advise us internally on each one of the regulatory strategies. So yeah, that's how we keep up. And again, I just want to emphasize, we've developed a large network of investigators that already trust us. That we're serious, we're professionals, we're bringing to them clinical research opportunities that they cannot find elsewhere, because we are the only ones doing this type of medical device first in human work.
So, permit me to ask a follow-up question on the cultural nuances. Have you ever run into any cultural barriers in different countries, or do you find yourself navigating smoothly?
Yes, of course, of course. Let's talk about Latin America. It's probably the best example, because some things are obvious. For example, the culture in Australia is very different from the culture in Serbia, which is
Yes.
a country where we have a small operation that we're just starting. That's, of course, it's like day and night. But in Latin America, people think that Latin America is one country, but it's not. It's actually 33 countries,
Right.
to be exact. And every country, of course, has its own culture, its own dialect. Even though most of us speak Spanish, except for Brazil, that speaks Portuguese, and a few islands here and there that speak English and other languages. Most of the region speaks Spanish. But if you go to Mexico, and it's totally different from the country next door,
Yes.
Costa Rica. And if you go to Costa Rica, it's totally different from Panama.
Yes.
And if you go to Panama, it's totally different from Colombia. So yes. But the only way to learn about that is, as I said first, by having local resources
Mm-hmm.
that can help you translate
Mm.
my Spanish to their Spanish. If
Yes.
I call a glass, and they call it something else, I need to know, I need to work with somebody who knows how to call a glass in Panama, right? Things like that. So yes, and it's something, again, that you gain by having a lot of experience. And once you do a trial in Mexico, you already know what's the cultural nuisance that you have to navigate, what are the language differences you have to navigate, and things like that. So for the next study, you are better prepared. Yeah,
Yes. I agree. I agree. Experience is always the best teacher.
exactly. Experience is always the best thing.
Julio, what has surprised you the most working with regulatory partners in emerging markets? Any surprises?
Yes, yes. I would say that it's not really a surprise, but it's kind of something that shouldn't happen, but it happens a lot. First of all, the regulatory requirements do not match the needs of the industry or the pace of the industry.
Okay.
Right?
Makes
In
sense.
other words, I'm just going to give you a quick example. Colombia. The medical device regulation in Colombia has not been updated since 1993. Imagine that, since 1993, over 30 years. And a lot has changed in the world.
I wasn't
In
even
30
born.
years. Exactly. So yeah, you're not even born. So you bring a very innovative device to a country like Colombia, you submit it to the regulator, they don't know what to do with it because the law doesn't talk about these type of devices. They cannot really fit it within the law. It's like trying to fit a circle in a square or vice versa. It's just going to be challenging. In many countries, for example, including Colombia, there's no classification for software as a medical device, which is a big trend in the world now. I mean, usually countries have laws for physical devices, right? And they divide these devices in different classes, risk classifications. That's how they call them. So meaning class 1 device is low risk, class 2 device is medium risk, and class 3 device is higher risk. Some countries even have class 4 devices, which is even higher risk. So, but they don't yet have software as a medical device. So where do you fit these software as a medical device with artificial intelligence in the classification, in the law? Some devices are a combination drug device. How do you fit them? Some devices work with mechanisms of action that have not been seen before. So how do you, is it a drug? Is it a device? Is it software? What is it? So those are big challenges that you once in a while find in countries, and you're like, wow. I mean, I'm amazed that a country like Colombia hasn't updated the laws yet. I mean, it's been 30-something years. Come on.
Very true. You know, the laws haven't updated to catch up with the innovation that's happening in modern times.
Exactly.
That could be
Yes.
very tricky to navigate.
Yes.
Tricky. Now, I know we talked a lot about, Latin America and other areas, Australia, that you have worked in. How can the U.S. and EU regulatory systems sort of learn from speed and efficiency you have seen elsewhere?
Yes. Well, the FDA is one of the best regulatory agencies in the world. And I think that the FDA navigates a very difficult, how do I say it, set of requirements. In other words, there is a big balance that they have to do between innovation and risk. One of the reasons why first-in-human trials do not happen in the US is because the country is very risk adverse. The FDA is very risk adverse. And also IRBs, Institutional Review Boards. There are many devices, innovative devices that are already approved in Europe or other places around the world and have not been approved in the United States yet because of this risk aversion. So the US needs to find a way to mitigate that or somehow balance that better so that more first-in-human trials happen in the US. But there are other reasons too why the US is not the country where most of the first-in-human trials happen. Also cost reasons. So if you're dealing with startup companies that have limited resources, then they're looking to save money and time elsewhere. So it's just difficult to balance that out. But there is a program in the US called the Early Feasibility Studies Program or something like that, where they have recognized exactly these challenges, and they're trying to bring more first-in-human trials, or not bring, they want to keep first-in-human trials from going overseas.
Mm.
They want first-in-human trials to happen in the United States with US patients. But it hasn't really worked out that well, to be honest with you. And I've been in this industry, as I said, for about 20 years. And it has been relatively successful, just with some cardiology devices for XYZ reason. But it hasn't really translated into other therapeutic areas because it's just really difficult to balance all those things. So for the foreseeable future, I think the most of the first in human trials with medical devices will happen overseas. I mean, because I don't really see the FDA trying to change things because it's not really their fault. It's a systemic thing. Has to do with the high cost of procedures in the United States that the FDA has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the large hospital systems that we have in the United States. So navigating those systems is really, really time consuming because, there are large companies, very bureaucratic. You need approvals for everything and meetings. So startup companies want speed and they have to go overseas to find that speed. Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you. And I can imagine the insurance also in the US. Such a complex system.
Exactly. Yes.
At the time. So makes sense. But then I think also if the opportunity is given to overseas for clinical research, that also presents a good amount of opportunity for them to update their legal systems and other processes to meet.
I actually participated very recently on a new clinical research bill in Colombia. I was able to work with a couple of congressmen in Colombia, and I was able to propose to them how the clinical law in Colombia should be updated, actually. As I said, since 1993, it hasn't been updated, and actually there was no law in Colombia. So on August 5th, we submitted the new proposal, the new bill, to the Colombian Congress. And hopefully that will update the law and make Colombia more attractive. So all those countries in Latin America and in other continents are updating their laws because they want more innovation to come. They want more trials to come because they see the benefit. They see that patients have early access to advanced medical technologies. They see investigators contributing and receiving this knowledge transfer from the US. And they also see the financial impact. They see that trials bring money to the local economies, and that translates into better jobs for people, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a win-win for everybody. And yes, more and more countries are attracting clinical trials to their economies.
Yes, I can understand why. And good luck to you guys with your proposal.
Thank you.
It works out. If BioAccess achieves its goal, its 2025 goal of 8 weeks of first patient in globally, what changes in the industry for us?
Wow, imagine. Yeah. I mean, we actually, about a month ago, we received approval in Panama for a trial that involves a technology that was developed at Oxford University in the UK. It's a company called Neurotex. This is public information. There was a press release out on this. We received approval in 15 days. Yeah, that's like what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks on that. So that's really fast. So we're very proud of that accomplishment. And we have developed this methodology to put together all these dossier packages really quickly and submit them quickly. And also we have good relationship with these institutional review boards, et cetera, and investigators so that we can get trials approved really fast.
Great. I'm looking out for it. And I think you guys are on an awesome trajectory. And I know, Julio, this question is personally connected to your legacy. What do you hope your legacy will be in the world of clinical research and medtech innovation? What is your prediction of your legacy should look like?
Yes. I want to see innovation coming not from the US, but from countries like Colombia, Salvador, from Panama. I want to see clinical research, what we do with clinical research, as a way for us to impact the local talent and to teach them how to innovate, because we bring these advanced teachers, so to speak, we bring these experts from the US to all these countries, and there's a knowledge transfer that happens. And eventually they will learn how to innovate, and eventually they will become countries where every day there's a new patent for a new medical device, just like in the US, from local universities. So I think that's my biggest dream as a legacy that I like to see happen. Yeah, a new patent from Colombia that became a device that Medtronic already has in its portfolio. That's my dream.
Amazing, amazing. And I'm happy for you that this is something you want to see happen. And I'm sure we're on the right path with all the work your team is doing around the world globally. Thank you for that. And thank you for being here. What should people find your work, or where should they contact you if they want to be in touch with you and learn more about what you have spoken about today?
Very simple. Just go to my personal website, Julio Martinez Clark, altogether.com, juliomartinezclark.com.
Thank you so much, Julio. Thank you for sharing your nuggets with us, your words of wisdom, and teaching us that innovation, medical innovation, actually starts from the university. So that is a
Yes.
key point that we're taking away from this podcast. Do you have any last minute words before we close today?
Well, this morning I woke up and had my first call with somebody in Peru who told me that he has a local CRO, we're friends, and he scheduled a call with me last week saying, Julio, I need to talk to you about something amazing. Do you have time on Monday? So we met at 8:30 Eastern today, and he told me exactly about what we were just discussing, about a local innovation that wants to be the next Medtronic product.
Wow.
From Peru, from a university in Peru. I'm like, wow, this is really amazing. And they're already collaborating with Cleveland Clinic, actually. So I was like shocked. I'm like, wow, this is exactly what I want to see happen. And so I invite all the innovators out there in the US to think about Latin America as a launch pad. You can do your trials in Latin America. You can actually get devices approved for sales, for commercialization in Latin America, faster than with the FDA, faster than in the US. So you can start selling locally in all these countries in Latin America before you start selling in the US. And that will help these companies generate revenue and not be dependent so much on future fundraising rounds and investors that dilute their equity. So this model is something that I invite all the innovators in the US to look at, because it's something that works. I mean, the red tape to get a device approved in a country like Colombia is way less than getting approved in the United States with the FDA. So companies can start making money in South America before they get approval in the US.
Thank you so much for sharing that wonderful story. I'm so happy for you. I guess good things happen in 2 or 3 folds as you start to put your information out there, and wish you the best of luck. And for everyone listening, I also hope you get an opportunity to do more research and engage with Julio or his team. It's been a pleasure speaking
Thank
with
you,
you.
Joyce. Likewise, it's been a pleasure.
All right. Bye, everyone.